Well, on the sidelines of President Trump's first ever state visit to India, I'm joined by a very special voice. Mr. Jayant Sinha is the chairman of the Standing Committee on Finance and has been one of the key economic policy makers in the government of India. Mr. Sinha, thank you very much for joining us and speaking to CNBC International. My first question to you is about the fact that there's most likely not going to be a trade deal during President Trump's visit this time around. Should we see that as a miss, or is it something that the world is overly fixated about? Should we look at US-India bilateral relations as multidimensional?
We must, in fact, look at this relationship on a multidimensional basis. Trade deals are complicated. There are challenges and issues and opportunities on both sides. There are important stakeholders on both sides. And so, under those circumstances, to put an artificial deadline, like a trip or like a deal that has to happen by a certain deadline is not really very fair. And in fact, as you correctly pointed out, the India-US relationship is very much a multidimensional relationship. For the longest time, in Washington and London, they have said that the relationship between the US and the UK is a special relationship. I think we need to change that now. In fact, the special relationship is between the US and India now. And the linkages on many levels, the multidimensionality of this relationship has become so robust and so important to both countries. I think this is really the true special relationship. And it's multidimensional in terms of national security. It's multidimensional in terms of people-to-people linkages. There are more than 3 million Indians now living in the US. It's multidimensional in terms of trade, of course. It's multidimensional in terms of capital markets and investments. And it's multidimensional also in terms of science and technology. So this is a very, very multifaceted relationship.
Sure, absolutely. And we've covered areas on defense, energy. Like you said, the people exchange has been very strong. But technology, you believe, is also an area that can be a strong binding factor for US and India, especially at a time when we're talking about two growing tech ecosystems in the world, the tech war between the US and China.
No, you're exactly right, Tanvir. And this is where I think we need to pay some very serious attention, because the technology world, the internet itself is beginning to fork. Right? We can clearly see that there is one direction which is China's direction, and then there is one direction which is led by the US. Now, India needs to decide which side it's on, because we do have a lot of Chinese investment in India. We have a lot of Chinese firms that are active in India as well. But equally true for the US, and US firms are very active in India. We also, at the same time, when it comes to privacy, when it comes to data localization, when it comes to the nature of e-commerce, we want to build our own tech ecosystem, our own startup ecosystem. So we have to navigate between these two poles that are rapidly starting to emerge. Take the whole issue of 5G technology and 5G standards. That has become a very contested issue globally, and the US is putting a lot of pressure on other countries to follow its path, not the China path. So in all of those issues, the way in which India decides to proceed, the manner in which India adopts or does not adopt certain standards, because of our vast internet ecosystem now that's developing, the hundreds and hundreds of millions of internet users that we have right now, the size of our e-commerce ecosystem, all of these things are going to make it very, very interesting as a battle between these two mega tech ecosystems.
I know, but it's a complicated equation, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to have more leverage in managing this equation at both ends. And that's what we are seeing play out between the US and China. What is India's leverage? I mean, a large part of the story when it comes to solving the technology issue with the US is the US saying India's talking about data localization, the US saying that India is trying to build walls when it comes to protecting the Indian retail sector, to keep the e-commerce giants not away, but making it not that easy for them to operate in India, or not giving them a free pathway. What do you think can be a good solution to finding common ground here? Because the US definitely brings its own leverage to the table, but India doesn't want to give up the fact that it is a big data market for US firms, and that's something that they do want to milk.
Yeah. So Tanvir, what's happening is that solutions are emerging. And as I said, the world is forking right now, and India has to find its own way. And whatever the solution that will emerge, and there are multiple aspects to it, those will be uniquely Indian solutions. And the reason is because we have a very vast both startup ecosystem as well as a customer base here in India. Remember that India now has, I think by last count, about 600 or 700 million internet users right now. And for many tech giants, whether it's Facebook, whether it is Google, outside of the US, we represent the largest market. Certainly in terms of total number of users, we represent a larger market than the US. So we are a very large market in and of ourselves. And so we will be coming up with uniquely Indian solutions. And of course, as they have said, data is the new oil. Yeah. And in India, we have lots and lots of data. We have lots of people generating lots and lots of data. We want our data to be localized here. We want our entrepreneurs to be able to work on that. We want new standards to develop, and we think there will be standards that will be developing, business models and innovations that will be developing in India that can go from India to the rest of the world as well, because we have everything that it takes to build a massive tech ecosystem.
But again, my question remains that how does India manage to be collaborative when it comes to the field of technology and technology sharing at a time when it's also being protectionist?
I don't know whether I would describe it that way, Tanveer. What I would suggest is that we want to take the best of both worlds. And at the same time, we don't want a situation where the tech world completely sort of breaks down between these two camps. And we have a bridging and important role to play because, as I said, we both have the Chinese tech giants as well as the US tech giants here. And we are building, as it comes to platforms, a very unique public-private type of platforms. It's not like China where a lot of it is controlled by the state. It's not like the US where almost everything is in private hands. We have, whether we look at digital payments, whether we look at, for instance, identity verification, in all of those cases you can see that we have developed a hybrid of our own. We've established our own standards where there is a combination of public as well as private standard setting. And so in that sense, as I said, we will come up with some uniquely Indian ways of doing it, and we can play a bridging role between these two tech ecosystems and also at the same time contribute our own innovations.
But wouldn't you say that India has an upper hand just because it's such an enviable data market for US giants to actually...
We have leverage. We have a lot of leverage, Tanveer, and it's leverage not just because of the number of users and the data that we are developing. We also have leverage because we have a lot of great developers. We have a lot of great entrepreneurs. We have a lot of innovation coming out of India as well. And that's part of the reason why big tech companies have very large research centers in India, and a lot of their products are being developed in India. A lot of their innovations are being developed in India. So we are a third pole in a way. As I said, there is this pole and this pole, which is the US and China. But India is very much a third pole. And we don't want a situation where, because of these two different directions that people are in, the whole global tech ecosystem kind of fractures.
The US has exercised its influence on 5G rollouts, not just in the US, but, with allies in the region, and they have had their own stand on the matter. Would the US exercise its influence when it comes to India's 5G rollout plans?
Well, they already are, and they have been doing this with their allies and partners around the world. And I'm sure those kinds of discussions have been happening in India as well. So let's see how all of this plays out. As I said, many of these issues are in the process of being resolved, are in the process of being discussed. So we will have to see what kind of outcomes emerge from all of this. But again, as I said, we are at a very intriguing stage as far as the tech world is concerned, because we, as I said, have these two poles. They are moving in different directions, but India absolutely has the potential to be a third pole as well. And much of what we're doing is uniquely Indian and uniquely impactful as well.
What do you expect to see come out of this big meeting between President Trump as well as Prime Minister Modi at the end of Tuesday, once President Trump goes back to the US? What would he take away with him in terms of a changing dynamic between these two, the world's largest democracy and the world's oldest democracy?
Well, I think first and foremost, President Trump is going to be very impressed and I think excited about India, because he'll see what a vast and exciting country India is, and how spectacular it is, whether it's the cricket stadium in Motera, whether it's the Taj, whether it's Delhi. I think he will see all of this and be quite impressed and fascinated by all of that. Secondly, I think that the personal relationship between President Trump and the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, which is already very good and robust, President Trump has already said that, I think is going to get stronger and better as well. So I think that certainly is going to happen. And then in certain areas like national security, certain areas like energy, I think we will have very substantive progress as well. As we discussed earlier, as far as trade is concerned, let's wait and see what can be accomplished. It's a complex subject. There are many pulls and pressures on both sides. So let's wait and see what happens there. But certainly the very special relationship that exists between India and the US is going to be immeasurably strengthened by this very important visit.
Was the administration saddened by the fact that the US, just ahead of President Trump's trip, scrapped India's developing nations status?
In a trade discussion, there are many issues that get put on the table. There are many aspects that have to be worked through. There are issues on the Indian side as well that we have concerns about, like the one you just mentioned. And I think the Americans on their side also have a number of issues that they're working with. And that's why, as I said, this is a complex negotiation. There are many moving parts, and we're going to see how we can converge those. But I'm very hopeful, given the kind of really capable negotiators we have on both sides, that they will be able to find common ground on a whole host of issues.
Okay, finally, this trip also comes in at a time when we are staring at India's Q3 GDP report coming in at the end of the week on Friday. What does the trajectory look like on growth, Mr. Sinha? Do you think things are picking up, or are things likely to bottom out from here?
Well, the Honorable Finance Minister has already stated that if you actually look at the green shoots, the leading indicators as far as the economy are concerned, they're all pointed in the right direction. So whether it's the Purchasing Managers Survey, whether it's GST collections, whether it is some of the high frequency indicators like electricity production or sales of certain vehicles, all of these are looking much more positive than they were. We've had a very good winter crop that has come in, so that's going to put money in the pockets of farmers. They'll go out and start spending money on things like tractors and other farm implements. So I think all of these bodes well for the economy. Everybody believes that we are past the two major shocks that have led to the growth coming down in India. One being the trade shock, which was the US-China trade battle that was going on, that now seems to have been resolved to quite an extent. And then secondly, the big credit shock that we went through in India as well, which through a series of measures that have been undertaken, the credit has started to flow again. The long-term repo operations of the RBI have helped a great deal in bringing rates down and bringing liquidity to our banks as well. So all of these measures that have been taken, I think, have gotten us past the trade issues as well as the credit issues that have bedeviled the Indian economy. And I think that's why, as we look forward now, and this is what I tell my colleagues in the opposition, they drive their car by looking at the rear view mirror, not looking through the windshield and looking forwards. But if we look forward and we look to the future, I think the economy definitely has troughed, and we are now starting to move up again.
So there's lots to watch out for.
Lots to watch out for.
Always
in India, never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment, Mr. Sinha. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Tanvi. Thank you.